Hi, and welcome to this week's edition of the Las Vegas Advisor Weekly Update with Anthony and Andrew. Today is Thursday, September 19th in the year 2024, and today we are joined by our guest, Richard Munchkin. Great to have you on board, Richard.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Welcome to the show.
After all these years I've been on his show, now he's on my show.
That's right, the Gambling with an Edge podcast.
Yeah. So, okay, let me tell you a little bit about Richard. Most people know who he is. I'm going to have to read some of this because I don't want to miss anything. I don't want to leave it out. This guy's got a resume, and he's got a resume. All right, so here's what I've got here. I mean, I've known, how long, Richard? 30 years?
Something like that, at least.
Yeah, about 30 years. One of the top gambling experts in the world, no doubt about it. What's interesting, both in theory and practice. So not only does he know a shitload about it, but he's done it for decades, making a profit, from gambling. All right. Author of our book, Gambling Wizards, Conversations with the World's Greatest Gamblers. Hosted Gambling with an Edge with Bob Dancer for years. Now, kind of sporadically producing Life as a Gamble, another podcast. We're going to talk about that. And I guess coming back to Gambling with an Edge, which is good news. Was a dealer when he first came to town. We'll talk about that. An independent movie producer, a magic aficionado, an actor. I've seen him in several plays. Well, not several, two. I've seen him in 2 plays, but he's done several. A backgammon pro, a member of the Blackjack Hall of Fame, 3-time winner of the Blackjack Ball Skills Contest.
There you go.
Which means he's no longer allowed to compete in that. And we have had really so many requests to have you on since we started having guests. I would say maybe Steve Sear. There were more requests for Steve, possibly. So everyone wants to see Richard Munchkin and hear what he's got to say. So why don't you start it off? Just give us a little chronology, your story, coming to Vegas, how it happened, kind of how you went up the ladder real quick.
Sure. Well, I became obsessed with gambling when I was about 15 years old. And I was making my way through college playing backgammon and poker. And a friend of mine named Jerry the Dentist, I was playing backgammon with him one night in a bar, and he said he had just come back from Vegas, and he had a system for beating blackjack. And I sort of rolled my eyes, and I was like, yeah, right. And he's like, no, this is real, this is math. And he started describing card counting to me. And I thought, okay, this sounds plausible, right? Maybe this is possible. And he told me about a book called Playing Blackjack as a Business. So you had to special order books back then. And so I special ordered it. I got the book. I read it. I became completely obsessed with it and would practice in my basement every night, learning basic strategy and how to count cards. And I thought, okay, when for my 21st birthday, I got myself one of those 4 days and 3 nights in fabulous Las Vegas that includes the hotel and the plane fare and all that. And I came out here, and I didn't know how to count yet, but I knew basic strategy.
From where? Where were you?
I grew up outside Chicago.
Okay.
Just outside in the suburbs of Chicago. Okay. So I came out for those 4 days and 3 nights and played basic strategy, and I won like $200. And I thought, oh my God, if I can win like this, just playing basic strategy, just think how much money I'll make once I learn how to count cards. And so after I graduated college, I moved out here, and I didn't have a big bankroll, so I thought I'll get a job as a blackjack dealer, and that way I can practice counting 8 hours a day and then go out after work. And
while you were dealing?
Yeah, while I was dealing.
Okay.
And then I would go out after work and play, and I was betting, nickels. There were dollar tables back then, so my spread was like $2 to 10 or something, playing single deck mostly. And then, the card counting world was really pretty small back then. I mean, really small. So because I was a dealer and I dealt in a place that had a fantastic single deck game, stand on 17.
That was Castaways, right?
Yeah, it was called the Castaways, which is where the Mirage sits today. And
not for long, but
right, not for long. That's right. But every card counter in the world would come in there. I mean, because the game was so good. So I met lots of guys because I would just talk to them at the table once I saw they were counting, and that freaked out a lot of people. But then they realized, like, I'm not there to bust them. I'm, just also interested in counting.
You would make them aware you knew what they were doing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I would point out their mistakes.
Okay.
So, which actually I have a story about that I'll get to in a second. But anyway, a guy came in one day, another card counter that I knew, and he said, hey, there is an Australian guy in town. He's got a professional blackjack team, and he wants to play backgammon for a lot of money. And I was like, set it up, whatever he wants to play for, because I knew all of the best players in the world, and none of them were from Australia. So he set it up, and that Australian turned out to be Alan Woods, who is in that book, Gambling Wizards, sitting there. I did an interview with him many years later. But anyway, through Alan Woods, he basically, we started playing backgammon, and after a week, he said to me, how come you're not playing blackjack for more money? And I said, well, I don't have a big bankroll, so I'm just betting small until I can build it up. And he said, well, how about I give you $20,000 and you go out and play for me until you double it, and then we'll split the money. And I'm like, you've known me a week and you're going to give me $20,000? And these are $1980. It's probably like $100,000 today. And he reached into his jacket and he pulled out 2 10-packs and slid them across the table to me.
Were you beating him at backgammon?
That's what I want to know.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Actually,
he had faith in you. You were a great backgammon player. He saw that.
Yeah, and he knew I was a blackjack player, and he wanted to give me a test, before playing, and but that really was what launched my career playing professionally.
Boy, Woods, he was quite a guy.
Oh, he was.
I mean,
yeah.
Partier, fantastic. We'll talk about him a little bit.
Yeah.
The story about him in the book is ridiculous. What this guy did.
Yeah.
But, okay,
he died about 10 years ago and left in a state of $1 billion.
Wow.
So, all from gambling.
Yeah, mostly horse racing.
Yeah, horse racing. He was Bill Benter's original partner in Hong Kong, and they had a falling out and went their separate ways, and so Alan still did quite well.
Yeah.
Well, how much did you take him for in backgammon?
Well, what happened actually was he was on a big comp at the Desert Inn, and when I got there, the first thing he said is, look, I've done some asking around, and I hear I'm outclassed. And I said, well, look, we don't have to play for a lot of money. We can, just play small and order lots of room service and have a good time. and it was like a blackjack convention in a suite at the Desert Inn, playing backgammon for small stakes and ordering lots of room service and having a good time.
Very cool.
Sounds like cool bonding.
Yeah, it was.
So it took off from there. I mean, that's it. It took off from there.
Well, actually, it's never that easy, right? So what happened was I started playing, and all I did was lose. Every time I went out, I would lose. I kept asking friends, like, will you come with me, sit at the table, make sure I'm not making mistakes, because I can't win. And they would come and sit and go, no, you're doing it right. It's just bad luck. And I lost for 167 hours.
Wow.
And at that point, Alan said, look, I have to go back to Australia. So I'm really sorry, but I have to end the bankroll. And I'm like, you're sorry? I lost like a bunch of your money. I'm the one who's sorry. And so he left, and I said, you know what, I quit. This sucks. I don't know if I'm just the unluckiest player in the world or I just play bad when no one's looking. And so I quit, and I was still dealing. And then a good friend of mine named Craig, who I knew from Chicago, another backgammon player, he joined Alan's team, and they just started making money like crazy. And after about 3 months, he came to me, and he goes, look, you got to give this another shot. Like, we're just winning money so fast, it's unbelievable. Like, just give it another try. So I said, okay. So I went out and I started playing again, and now I started winning.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, how many ships got sunk
Oh, yeah.
Because of bad fluctuations in the beginning.
Absolutely.
I mean, how many bad players went forward because they got lucky, and how many good players stopped themselves out of the game?
Yep, yeah, absolutely true. And I think the same thing happens in all forms of gambling. You know, poker, you know.
My situation wasn't that much different. I started off, I couldn't win, and that's how I got into coupons. I didn't want to quit. I wanted to keep doing it, but I'm like, I can't, this is not sustainable.
Right.
You know, the way I'm going,
yeah.
this is not sustainable. And I'm like, I need a bigger edge. And that's why I got into coupons until the ship got righted, you know,
Yep.
whether I fixed myself or whether it was just bad fluctuations or whatever it was, right?
Well, but I thought the same thing too. I need a bigger edge.
Yeah.
And so immediately sort of moved into shuffle tracking and then, you know, whole card play and you know, just other avenues that provided a bigger advantage.
Good, man. And then, all right, so how you dealt till...
Well, I dealt until I was making more money playing in a quarter of the hours, and even then, you know, I was nervous about it, and because I had 2 mortgages at that point, and I was talking to one of the guys I worked with who was a pit boss, and I said, you know, I'm making more money playing than I am dealing, but, you know, I'm afraid to quit the job. And he's like, are you out of your mind? Like, quit, you know, today. And he said, what's the worst that can happen? Like, you're not going to starve, right? If you go broke, you can always get another job.
How did I know you then? Did you pick me off on a table?
Quite possibly, because I mean, so many people were coming through with coupons at the the Castaways. The coupons were everywhere.
Because I don't know if you remember this, but I came in once with Peter Griffin. We didn't know each other real well, but I knew then. By then, I knew who you were, and we sat down at your table. Now, Peter Griffin, for people who don't know, wrote The Theory of Blackjack, one of the greatest blackjack mathematicians of all time, gambling mathematicians. You know everything. He, Ed Thorpe, Stuart Ethier. These are the top names. And I brought Peter to your table and introduced him to you while you were dealing. And I said, Richard's like really good with magic and stuff. And you're like,
yeah.
Do you remember this?
Yo, I don't remember that, but I actually had met Peter before that because remember when I said I would point out people's mistakes, right? So I'm dealing to this guy.
Oh, I know where this is going. Go ahead.
And he has 10 deuce against a 6, and he hits it. And I said, you know, you're really going to have to go back and do some more studying. You know, that's a stand.
To Peter Griffin.
And to Peter, and he looks at me. He gives me this really weird look, and he goes, "Well, actually, I think it's a fine point of basic strategy. 10 deuce against a 6 is a hit." And I'm like, "No, 10 deuce against a 4 is a hit. 10 deuce against a 6 is a stand." He goes, "Well, according to Peter Griffin's new book, it's a hit." And I said, "Who's Peter Griffin?" Now, when this happened, the book had not come out yet. He was coming to town to meet with John Luckman at the Gamblers Book Club to, they were the ones going to publish the first edition. And, you know, he said, and then he tells me, well, you know, this guy has got this book coming out, Theory of Blackjack, and Stanford Wong in his monthly newsletter says he's the best blackjack player in the world.
Peter's telling you this.
This is Peter Griffin telling me this. And I started laughing, and I said, well, maybe he's one of these guys like Thorpe who knows a lot about math, but nothing about playing. And anyway, then he ended up telling me that he was Peter, and he ended up, when the book was published, he came and he brought me a signed copy, and which I wish I knew whatever happened to that book. I cannot find it.
Such a great guy, and he played differently. I mean, he used a different count, and he kept side counts of like 6 different cards.
Yeah.
Right, and he used to, and then he had it in his head like a matrix. You know, he'd go down to, he'd take a deck and go through it, and with about a dozen cards left, he'd tell you exactly what was left.
Well, he would do that to me when I was dealing.
Okay.
So he kept basically the high up one with a side count of deuces, 7s, aces, and the relationship of 5s to 6s, because the relation of 5 to 6s is the only really important thing on whether to hit 16 against a 10 or not. Anyway, so I would, and the exact number of cards dealt.
Yeah. Actually, I think he used a Gordon count.
I don't know what the Gordon is.
It was called the Gordon count, slightly different. All right, and that's why he did, and then he kept all the sides.
Yeah, but so I would deal to him, and then he would say, when I was ready to shuffle, he would say, like, you have 10 cards left, there's 1 7, 1 ace, you know, and just, like, name the cards. And I would, spread the cards face up, and, he was just never wrong.
Oh, we'd go play. Peter was so good in theory, but not so much in application. I mean, yes, in application, he could do it, but he didn't like to risk money.
Yeah.
He only wanted to play the smallest stakes. So when Binion's Horseshoe every year would have their 2-to-1 blackjack during Christmas time, $5 max, he was in heaven.
Yeah.
And he'd come and he and I would play 10, 12 hours at a time at this, just playing at $5 at 2-to-1. And I saw the most amazing things. I mean, he'd have a 17 and the dealer would have a 9 and he'd hit. And he'd look at me, he'd go 4s. because it was rich in 4s, right?
Yeah.
Or he'd go 4s and 3s. Yeah. Just like there was like a Rain Man in a way, but nothing like that. He was just very eloquent and very funny. He was just one of the greatest guys ever.
Yeah. The other thing is I remember one time I'm dealing to him and he doesn't have a bet and he says, I said, are you going to bet? Because I knew the count was positive. And he's like, you only have 8 cards left. I was like, that's enough for another hand. So he loved playing with me because I gave him a game nobody else would give him.
Fun.
That's funny.
All right, we could go on with this forever. Let's move down a little bit to...
Well, before we move on, I just have one pressing question. If I got a 12 and the dealer's showing a 6, I stand.
Okay, so if it
Right?
were a single deck...
Okay.
If it were a single deck, and that is the first hand off the top of the deck, you actually should hit it.
Interesting.
The 10-2.
The 10-2.
The 10-2, yeah, not a regular 12, made up of a 10 and a 2.
Oh, so it has to be a 10 and a 2.
It's
Okay.
called composition dependent. So it's
Okay.
not just about total dependent. It's called composition, what it's made up of. All right, so we could go with these stories, man, forever. Really. I mean, we'll probably have to have you back just on that. But I want to get into a couple of other things. The movies, man. I mean, I just think that it's a wild part of what you did. You put it out to your gambling friends. We were able to invest. I invested in a couple of them. 50-50 ain't bad for a return. One winner, one loser, right? And you said you did 10 total?
Yeah, not as the producer, but I directed 10 and directed on 2 different television shows. But, originally my college degree was in theater, and my original intent was to be an actor. And gambling was just a way to afford the arts, right? You need, the arts are sort of like heroin. You need to find a way to be able to pay for it. Right. And so my plan from the start was come to Las Vegas, make a bunch of money gambling, go to Hollywood, become a movie star.
Okay.
And my fallback plan was if that didn't work, then I'd be a television star instead.
Okay, gotcha.
And
good diversity, yeah.
And so I made a bunch of money gambling. I moved to Hollywood and found pretty quickly that acting in film and television was not at all like my background in theater. And actors are treated just horrendously in Hollywood. And one day, my agent called me and said, we have a commercial audition for you. And the first thought that went through my mind was, oh, how can I get out of this? And I knew it was over. I was like, this is not what I want to do with my life. And it was kind of a big existential crisis for me because I had spent basically my whole life thinking that's what I was going to do with it. And now I didn't know what I was going to do. And, so I was still gambling to earn a living. And a friend of mine started producing movies, and I started working on them for him on the crew. And I just kind of fell into it and was doing it, having a good time. And then he offered me the chance to direct. And I said yes, and I started directing. I loved that. And so kind of went on from there. And then eventually for my own company, started producing my own stuff.
With all the ins and outs of the financials of that. Andrew, this is Andrew's thing. You know, Andrew did this for a while and still does.
Yeah, I've produced 15 independent films that you people have never heard of, but
Yeah.
but they're out there, you
But
know,
I'm
and
telling
it's
you,
a lot of fun.
Richards did. They got air. I mean, we saw these things. I mean, I wrote down 3 of them because I thought were particularly interesting. Okay, one was, I think I got the years right. 1992, Deadly Bet.
Oh, no, that was much earlier. That was about 1990, I want to
Was
say.
it? Okay.
Yeah.
The reason I caught my attention, now I didn't invest in that one. I didn't know you then, I don't think, or I wasn't asked or something. But you had Charlene Tilton in that.
Yeah, yeah.
That was from the girl from Dallas, right?
Right, right.
You had
Beautiful girl.
Ray Boom Boom Mancini, the boxer.
Yeah, yeah.
Ray Boom Boom Mancini. And I guess a cameo, Darryl Purpose. And people go, who's Darryl Purpose? Well, look up the Hall of Fame Blackjack. He's one of the Hall of Fame members.
Right.
Who did what? Played a banjo or something like that?
Well, no, Darryl has been my partner for like 40 years in gambling, and his art is he's a singer-songwriter, and he's got, I don't know, half a dozen CDs out. Not that anybody buys CDs anymore, but I mean, he's still making music. And so, he was in town, and I was like, here, you're going to be a street musician. And, you know, we put him out Fremont Street with his guitar case open, playing and singing. And you know, people went by that didn't know and were throwing money in his guitar case. So.
Did he have hair?
Yeah, he had hair back then.
He had hair back then? Oh, my God. I got to pull that one out of the
It's
mothballs.
near the end of the movie, so...
All right, 2 others. These are out of order. They were done in a different order. Evil Obsession. I think I saw in 1996 with creepy Corey Feldman.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't remember if that's the year, but yes,
Okay.
but the rest of it's right.
But the other one, and that's the one where the first one I did with you was Texas Payback. And I did get payback. I got my money back. I got profit. I'm going, this is the way to go. This is strong.
That's incredible that you got your money back.
Yeah,
you know?
then we went to evil. Well, there's a gambler's, credo here.
Yeah.
You know, he probably didn't make any money. He gave all his friends their money back, right, with our profits. And then I lost it back on creepy Corey Feldman and Evil Obsession. But,
You know, what happened was that there was this boom for these movies, and we kind of hit just as the boom was ending.
yeah.
And so, yeah. And
What year was the Corey Feldman movie?
it said 96 when I looked it up.
Might be 96. Maybe it came out 96 and we shot it 95. Somewhere around there.
But
though.
here's the interesting one. Here's the one you want to look up. Texas Payback. That was a good movie, man.
I think that's the best movie I did.
Well, listen who was in this. Sam Jones.
Yeah.
Who is, if you're a little bit of an old timer, you'll know who Sam Jones is.
Yeah.
Or if
he
you
was
look him
Flash
up,
Gordon.
Yeah.
I mean,
you'll recognize him. Bo Hopkins.
Yeah.
Right. Kathleen Kinmont was pretty big.
Yeah.
Right. She did some stuff. And 2 guys from the gambling world. One, nobody would know him, Phil Barrier.
yeah.
Filthy Phil.
Yeah.
Was in it, I guess. But here's the big one. Max Rubin. Comp City and Blackjack Ball. Max Rubin gets shot in a bar, right?
Right. He's a bartender, and the movie is about a guy who escapes from prison, and Max plays an ex-Texas Ranger that was one of the guys who put him in prison, and the guy comes to search him out and kill him.
Texas Payback.
Right. And so Max gets shot in the bar, and it's funny because when we were filming that, we were shooting in a little strip club that's still there, actually, but I don't even know if it's still open. That place on Flamingo.
Club Platinum.
Is that what it's
Club
called?
Platinum, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Still there, right next to Tuscany.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, there's all kinds of places you'd recognize, right? Didn't you shoot in Good Springs and the bar there and everything?
Yeah. But anyway, when we were going to shoot that, Max was there, and I could tell he was really nervous, and he's pacing and everything. And I don't know if it was about the part about being shot. I think it was just like the talking that he was so nervous about. And I went over to him and I said, "You a little nervous?" And he goes, "I wasn't this nervous when I put in my first cooler." You have to know a little about gambling for to get
you
that
do.
reference. But
False deck for cheating. You know,
Yeah.
you get it in under the nose of the bosses. That's pretty scary stuff.
That
Yeah.
sounds really scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But look these things up. It was it was a pretty good run.
You know, the other thing about that movie, Texas Payback, well, first of all, I have to say, we finished the movie. I mentioned that this was just like the beginning of the decline. We sold the movie to a company, and right after we sold it, the company went out of business, and that movie was never released in the United States.
Oh, wow.
So, but the other thing that is crazy about that movie, this was before they had the canopy on Fremont Street, and we flipped a car at the corner of Fremont and Casino Center, sent it through the back of a truck, which exploded in this huge ball of fire. And then, you know, the car flips over down the street. And the fire marshal was there as we were setting all that up. And he just was shaking his head going, I can't believe they're letting you do this.
Yeah.
That sounds like a big budget movie.
Well, it was,
That was kind of like that was your code or your recipe, right? Your recipe was kind of like one big explosion. It seemed like in every movie there was like one big pyrotechnic thing that
You
happened.
need it for the trailer.
Yeah. There had to be some kind of action going at least every 7 to 8 minutes.
Oh, that's
you know?
cool. That's cool. All right, so let's talk a little bit about your book, about Gambling Wizards. This book, to me, honestly, is one of the most under the radar great books that we've done at Huntington Press. I'm not just saying that because you're here. I say that when you're not here. People ask me all the time, they go, how do I become an AP? How do I become an advantage player? And one of the things I tell them is I say, you read Gambling Wizards, where you've got 8 different guys, people, not all guys, who are the subjects. All of them advantage players, big deals. Billy Walters, Doyle Brunson, Chip Reese, 2 poker players, Kat Hulbert, another Hall of Famer, female, blackjack player and poker player, Mike Svobodny, backgammon, Stan Thompson, sports betting, and then later booking online.
Yeah, I mean, he founded Pinnacle Sports.
Yeah.
I mean, although we don't talk about Pinnacle in the interview for legal reasons, but he talks about his betting. And
fascinating. The aforementioned Alan Woods.
Yeah.
And Tommy Highland, one of the greatest blackjack team leaders of all time. I mean, that must have been wild, eh? I mean, doing that and talking to those guys, and they were also forthcoming. I mean, their stories are here. It's in an interview style, so it's very easy to read.
Yeah. So what happened was I was going to Hong Kong to work for Bill Benter, and I was reading a book on the plane called Market Wizards. And this Market Wizards is a very well-known business book where a guy interviewed options and futures traders. And I was reading the book, and I was thinking, you know, gamblers are way more interesting than these people. Yeah. And so I got to Hong Kong, and I went to Bill Benter, and I said, hey, I want to do this book. I want to interview a bunch of the best professional gamblers in the world. And he goes, I can't do it, but you know Alan will do it. And I said, yeah, okay. So I called Alan. He was like, oh, yeah, sure. Come on over. Wow. And that was really how it started. So the other thing is, at that time, Billy Walters did not talk to anybody. Mm-hmm. There were no interviews with Billy Walters. I mean, now he talks to everybody. But it was a real coup, actually, to be able to interview him.
I haven't read his book yet, but I think from talking to people, I think there are things in this interview that he didn't talk about in his book even. I believe because I asked, did he talk about this, talk about that? And some people said, yeah, he did. And some said, no, I don't recall reading that. This is it's a really great chapter. It's the first chapter. But also about this book, almost nobody knows this, but working with Richard and me very closely, coming into the office and sitting in the conference room and going over the manuscript was James Grosjean.
Yeah. And when I first sent him the book, we were meeting somewhere, I forget, and I was picking him up at the airport. I think it might have been in Reno, and he comes through the airport, and he has just had the book for some period of time, and it's the first time I'm seeing him since he has it. And he has a 3x5 card, and on it is a giant comma. and he said, "Have you ever seen one of these?" and later I found out that you and Deke were referring to me as comatose because I guess the comma key was broken on my computer, but. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, he.
That's funny.
He was a big help in editing the book.
A lot of long sentences that we worked on. But it is a great book, and we did something in there that some people think works, and some people say doesn't. But I think it does. We called it. We never did it again, so we didn't like it that much. But we called it Living Glossary, and a living glossary was when we're talking about stuff like you brought up cooler earlier. And now how would anybody, if you haven't heard, why would you know what a cooler was? Right. But if the word cooler came up in this, or anything, mechanic, or whatever would come in, we would have a little thing in brackets that would be an explanation. Instead of having to go to the back and look it up in a glossary, it was right there in the text. So you learn a lot about the inside talk, the jargon of gambling in Gambling Wizards.
Well, the other thing I like about the way that you formatted the book was these kind of sidebars. So, for example, when Stam Thompson or Billy Walters talks about the computer group, which was kind of the first big group using computer analysis to beat sports, there's like a sidebar that tells the story of of the computer group and stuff. So. Yeah. I'm very proud of the book. People ask me all the time when I'm going to do another one, and I did enough interviews with blackjack players. The second book was going to be called Blackjack Wizards, but I ended up just putting them online. I mean, and they're all at, gamblingwithanedge.com. You can go find those interviews.
Well, you learned real fast that not many people get rich off of doing a book.
Hey, I made, at least $2 an hour working on this book. So
that's
it was
generous.
Well worth it.
Yeah, that's generous. So, all right. So let's go from there to the thing that you're probably best known for, which Gambling with an Edge. You and Bob Dancer. Really, Bob Dancer started that.
Yep.
He had some other co-hosts, Mike Shackelford, the Wizard, video poker guy.
Yeah.
Nealand.
Yeah. I can't think of his name.
All right, we'll start that one over.
Okay.
Yeah.
Frank Nealand.
Yeah. He had some other co-hosts before you.
Well, just one. He started out with Frank Nealand, and he, at the end of 6 months, he said, "This is not working out,"
Right.
And he went on a search for a new co-host. And he talked to two people. One of them was John Chang, and the other one was my friend Craig, who I told you about, that told me I had to give blackjack card counting a second try. And both of them told him he should get me.
But in between, wasn't Shackelford?
No. So I started, and I was going back and forth. I was living in California at the time, and I was going back and forth, and it just got to be too much. And after about the first year, I said, "Look, it's too much. I can't, do this." And that's when Mike Shackelford came in.
That's right.
And then I think Mike did about a year, and then I was moving back to Las Vegas, so I took back over.
Yeah.
And
in my opinion, again, when people ask, "How do I learn AP style?" I go, it's more of a way of life than anything. I mean, you've got to have the skills, you've got to know it, but it's a way of thinking. It's a way of life and a way of thinking. And I tell them, you've got to listen to this. In my opinion, probably the best gambling podcast of all time was Gambling with an Edge.
Well, thank you. Yeah,
and
thank you.
You had a big part to do with that. What's it like working with Bob Dancer?
Hey, you know what? It was fine. We get along fine. I mean, and I think, Bob got kind of his reputation smeared by a lot of people who claimed he was, ratting out video poker players to casinos and stuff. And I remember when he first approached me, my friend Craig said, "Look, you're going to hear a bunch of crap about him." And he said, "I know him well. I don't think any of it's true. After having worked with him for 13 years now, I also do not believe any of it's true."
I don't either.
But there are people who just cling to that idea that...
well, there's a lot of haters. There's a lot of haters who don't like the fact that he's the video poker guy. They're like, "I want to be the video poker guy."
Yeah,
And that's the way it is. It happens with everybody.
Yeah.
You don't worry about it. Okay, so I guess, I mean, the word is that you're going to be doing, you guys stopped doing Gambling with an Edge, but possibly you're going to be putting it back together a little bit here and there, kind of sporadically.
Yeah, exactly. So we did an episode a couple of weeks ago about the blackjack ball, and so occasionally we will do another Gambling with an Edge episode when it seems like a good fit. I've started another podcast also called Life is a Gamble, and I wanted to be able to talk to people who were not necessarily in the gambling world about just sort of the gambles in their life. So both of those are still happening, just not very often.
What's the frequency of Life is a Gamble? I mean, how would people find it? Everybody knew where to go for Gambling with an Edge. Is it easy to find? I don't know.
It's on YouTube. It's in all the podcast apps.
Okay. We'll put it in the description box.
It's actually the same YouTube account. So both shows go in the same YouTube channel.
Okay.
And not only that, you can access all of the old Gambling with an Edge podcast episodes through the Las Vegas Advisor.
Yeah.
Well, and the new ones too. Yeah. I still post them here when.
That's something really important for people to know, because they go, well, Las Vegas Advisor is paywalled, but not these. This is another thing. We talked a couple weeks ago about the 888 gambling articles that are not paywalled.
That's right.
We also do not paywall Gambling with an Edge, the archived ones. The new ones, Life is a Gamble, they're open to the public. So come to LasVegasAdvisor.com, and that's the easiest way to find it right there. All right, so how about just a couple of random questions? All right?
Sure.
We'll get into it. The first thing we're going to start off with, me and you we're gonna strike up our old debate. The one thing that probably you and I do not agree on, but I'm starting to, if you say so, I'm going to believe it. But we're talking about roulette. All right, and you can stop me if you disagree or if I'm missing something. But essentially, there are like three ways potentially to beat roulette. All right, one is prediction, based on physics and that sort of thing. Two is bias wheels and whatever. Three is what I would call a split of what they call dealer signature or dealer targeting. Now, I know those are two different things. Signature is when people say a dealer just gets used to it and you can start clocking where the dealer's going to put the thing. I don't think that happens. I don't know if you do. I don't think you do either. But you say when you dealt roulette, you could target and hit segments. And I go, is that really possible?
So, first of all, a couple of things. There is an entire roulette community, much like the professional blackjack community. There is a whole group of people around the world that actually make a living playing roulette. Now, many of them are using computers, which is illegal in most places, not everywhere, but most places. One of the things that's interesting about this to me is Arnold Snyder had this publication called Blackjack Forum, and he did an article in Blackjack Forum by Steve Forty, who basically said, this is a myth. Dealers cannot do this. And
one of the reasons I feel that way.
I wrote a letter
said,
into Blackjack Forum at that time, and I said, I 100% am on the other side of this. So there are some caveats. The new wheels that they have today with the very tiny pockets, I think it would be maybe impossible to do it on those wheels. On the older wheels that had deeper pockets, not only do I believe it, every professional roulette player I've talked to believes it, and every dealer believes it. And I mean, the first thing I did when I started dealing roulette was start trying to spin the ball exactly, trying to create a signature. Try to spin the ball exactly 12 revolutions. And it helps enormously if the wheel has a drop-off point. If the ball is dropping off from the same point consistently, not 100% of the time, but more often than not, if it's dropping from the same point, you absolutely can learn to do this. Now, one of the interesting things about Steve Forty is he seemed to believe that this was possible, that dealers could have a signature. And I said, Steve, are you telling me that you think dealers can unconsciously control the ball, but not consciously. And he was like, oh, yeah, I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
So anyway, as I say, every professional I know believes it. Every dealer believes they can do it.
Is there any way to exploit that? I remember you used to say, look, if you find a dealer who can and you tip them,
Yeah.
you still think, I mean, that's a lot of moving parts, you know, not just the moving parts on the wheel.
So I have a friend who, as I say, is probably the most well-known roulette player in the world. He wrote the only books on it, Lawrence Scott.
Yep.
And he can take you to a dealer at the Bellagio. Now, the Bellagio, they return to those games. They deal the same game for 8 hours a day.
Their whole life.
5 days a week.
Yeah.
And he said, there's a dealer there. You can go in and you can bet for you and for her, and you will win. And then once she's got enough, she will start taking it all away from you. But if you just quit, you know.
Well, I respect you. I respect Lawrence Scott. You know, it's very hard for me to argue. People who are interested, 2 great books on it. Eudaimonic Pi, which talks about prediction and what they did with computers and all of that. And Russell Barnhart's, right? Beat the Wheel, was it? Was it called Beat the Wheel?
And there's the sequel to Eudaimonic Pi called Follow the Bouncing Ball, because Lawrence Scott and Mark Billings went and contacted the guys in Eudaimonic Pi, and they took over that project.
I hate to say this. I turned that one down.
Ah.
Billings brought it to me. That's one of my big regrets. I turned that book down because I thought it was too complicated for what we were doing at the time.
Ah.
I wish I had that back.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
So,
But I just have to tell you this story about Lawrence Scott to let you know how crazy obsessed he is with roulette. He went to a surgeon and asked him if he could put a flap in his head that he could put a tiny computer to beat roulette. And the surgeon was like, you want a flap that opens and closes on your head, and you think you're going to be able to not get it that infected somehow?
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Something
crazy.
else.
That's wild. You know, from my perspective, I hope that there's a such thing as a dealer signature. It sounds cool. It sounds like something to go look for.
Yeah, you know why? Because that's a magic pill. 'Cause
Right.
you're like, oh, wouldn't that be nice and
Wouldn't
fun
that be
and
cool?
easy?
Well,
yeah.
you know,
I'm going to the Bellagio.
They're absolutely, if you're allowed to, an easier version of the signature is on the big 6-wheel.
Yes.
So that's something you can clock. And
if there were any big 6 wheels anymore.
oh, really? Have they gotten rid of?
They're almost all gone.
Are you talking about the manual big 6 wheels
Yeah.
where you manually spin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there's things you can do there.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, I mean, I'm talking again, roulette. This way, that way, ball. You know what I mean? There's just a lot of moving pieces. Okay, let me ask you a couple of quick ones that people have asked me or asked me to ask you, or I
Okay.
know that they would. All right, we just talked about roulette. Dice control, yes or no?
Sort of. So, yes, it is possible to learn to have some effect on the dice, but I don't think you can make any money at it. As soon as you go out and try to do it, as Frank B. talked about a lot on Gambling with an Edge, it's so obvious what you're trying to do, and they just shut it down right away. So, yeah, at home, on your crap table at the house, I'm sure you can get a big edge, but try to do it in a casino, I just think it'd be really hard to actually make any money at it.
So you're saying that's if they see you setting the dice, like some casinos will tell you, you can play craps, but we don't want you setting the dice.
Well, it's not just setting the dice, which, I mean, I'm sorry, but if you have to take forever to set the dice, you're an idiot. Like, you should be able to pick them up and set them at the same time very quickly. What they'll tell you is both dice have to bounce off the back wall. And, you know, I've never heard any of these dice control people claim that they can control the dice bouncing them off the back wall. It's always, you know, land right up to the wall.
Correct.
And, you know,
And make as small of a bounce as you can.
yeah, exactly. And they'll just stop you from doing that. Or they'll just say, you can't shoot anymore. And what's crazy is usually the people trying to do this are losing players anyway. Like one of the best episodes of Gambling with an Edge was this guy Casey, professional blackjack player, did a fantastic movie documentary called Inside the Edge, and when he got barred everywhere as a card counter, he would still get mail offering him free play to, come pick up. So he couldn't do it at blackjack, so he decided to start dice controlling with the free play. And he started winning like crazy. And they threw him out of quite a number of places, and the win was like, come on and control all you like. You know what I mean? And he basically, he had gone up $1 million, and he lost almost all of it back at the win. And before he realized I was deluding myself. Wow. I never had an edge.
Interesting. Well, yeah. Frank B., as you speak, he says it's really all about the table.
Yeah.
He says it's the kind of table that you get that will allow this to happen. But it's those guys who, they get there and they sit like this and they do that and they do that and they get their legs apart and they wait and and nobody's going to put up with that crap, you know? And I mean, and they're probably no good anyway. They're acting it.
Yeah.
So
I think they want to be able to be thrown out so they can go home and go, yeah, they won't let me play craps.
Right.
I'm just too good.
Well, and that's not the same as, what they used to call the shot, which is sliding. Sliding dice is different.
Right. Well, actually, no. Sliding is different and illegal, but there's also something called the shot, where one of the die travels through the air. It's not slid. It travels through the air, and the other die bounces randomly. And so Steve Forty in his book talks a lot about this shot, and there was a guy named Sal who was the guy who could do this shot. I knew Sal. He was murdered back in the early 80s. He used to come to the backgammon club. But
Griffin writes about Sal in Extra Stuff.
Yeah.
In his book, Extra Stuff. And 40 has demonstrated the sliding dice to me.
Yeah.
I've seen him do it. It's unbelievable. They'll kill it on the puck, or they'll kill it on chips or something like that. Basically, it's spinning and it kills. So, I mean, there's so much going on in all these different games. There really is. Okay, next. This is another one, hard to answer. Play with a player's card, yes or no?
Well, if you're a professional, then no. If you're trying to get comps and things like that, then yeah, of course. But I mean, every person who learns card counting, like they just don't listen. You listen to, for example, Colin Jones has a podcast for Blackjack Apprenticeship where he interviews card counters, and the guys who are on there that are really successful, invariably they say, yeah, when I first started, I was using a player's card, and boy, was that a mistake.
Okay. All right. So the person who is going to seriously try to make money beating casinos, or can make money, should not be using a card. But
Absolutely
doesn't that
not.
Just invite scrutiny?
To not use it?
I always used it because I thought the minute I go, I don't want to show you my card, that just opens the floodgates of scrutiny.
All I can tell you is millions and millions of dollars have been won with no player's card.
Okay. Good.
So, yeah.
All right, good advice. Online, sports and casino. Are there still opportunities? I mean, with the bonuses, the sign-ups, and everything else. I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, that's what I'm doing full time now. Not so much the bonuses. I'm betting sports full time. Regular listeners of Gambling with an Edge will know that I have said often that retiring is easy. I've done it like 6 times. And I was busy being retired when my longtime partner, DARRYL, convinced me about a year ago to come out of retirement and start betting sports. Mm-hmm. So, there are still bonuses to be had. And, sports is something that can be beat.
Yeah, we're getting into that here.
Yeah.
The bonus, the affiliates, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You and I will have a conversation after the show.
Cut.
Okay, real quick, there's something I want to ask all our guests. For you, do you have a favorite 1 or 2 gambling books? That's first part A. Part B is, for a person who wants to learn blackjack, is there an account you would recommend? So take those in either order.
Yes to both questions. Favorite gambling book would probably be a book called Fast Company by John Bradshaw.
Great book.
Was one of the inspirations for my book. It, is a profile of 6 professional gamblers.
Kind of inspiration for this almost in a way.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it was an inspiration for Gambling Wizards. Absolutely.
Oh, you did say that. I'm sorry. I thought you said for you gambling. Oh, excuse me.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Well, and also for me as a gambler. Yeah, but I just love that book. I also this is kind of a weird one, but I love the stories from Damon Runyon. I don't know if you've ever read any of his stuff, but he used to write for I don't know, the New York Times or one of the New York papers, and he would write these stories about gamblers on Broadway and back in the 20s and 30s, and it's his writing that has inspired a bunch of movies like Little Miss Marker and Guys and Dolls, and anyway, they're just great stories. So
cool.
I love those. Count, for decades, I always recommended the high-low, and now, basically, James Grosjean convinced me that KO is better.
Knockout.
The problem is people are not as good at counting as they think they are.
Yeah.
And so the simpler it is, the better it is. So
I agree.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've for years I've used Houston APC, 3-level count. And I'm switching. I'm going to play, if I ever am allowed to play again, or in retirement, if I play again or whatever, I'm going to use the knockout count.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to make that true count conversion. You don't have to do the deck estimation. You don't have to do any of this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just such a difference. And Grosjean, too, listening and talking to him had a big part in swaying me on that.
Yeah. And it's what he uses. So,
Yep.
All
right. Great. All right. So last thing. What are you up to now? What's next?
Well, as I mentioned, sports betting.
That's it?
Basically, I'm sports betting full time. Like, up at 6 a.m. and,
How do we get in on that?
Yeah, good question.
You got accounts that are clean? Well, we can talk.
So you not contests and things.
No.
Mostly just lots of outs and finding the.
And I'm not interested in what they call top-down betting. I work with a number of different originators who create models that, and they come up with numbers, and I help them bet those games.
Isn't it great in gambling? You can retire and still gamble.
Right.
It's terrific. Richard, thank you so much. Great to have you, man. I mean, I don't know. Really, we might have to put this into a couple of sections, This is such a great talk.
Yeah, we might cut it up. We might not, but we'll see.
We shall see.
That's it for this week. Thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing as usual. Thank you for Richard to taking the time to come visit us today.
Happy to do it anytime.
And we'll see you next week.
Well, I'm going to Las Vegas.